James Harden, the beard, 32 straight games now of 30 points. He could not be more of a bold-faced name in the NBA, calling out an official by name. How does that sit in New York City in league office, do you think, today, Howard?
It won't sit well. Not coming from James Harden as the reigning MVP, not coming from Chris Paul as a longtime veteran, decorated All-Star, and, by the way, president of the Players Association. Those are two people with a lot of weight to throw around if they want to. And the fact that Chris Paul revealed that he's had meetings between the league and himself and Scott Foster is interesting on its own. There have been people around the league since Chris Paul has been in this position who have thought that he has used his position as president of the Players Union to his advantage or used it as something to hold over people. I've even heard of him telling referees in the midst of a game, hey, I've got this relationship with Adam Silver. So he's not shy about using whatever authority or weight he believes he has. Now, all that said, I'm not saying he's in the wrong necessarily. I don't know. I don't know what the root of this, supposed beef is between him and Scott Foster, or the fact that he thinks that Scott Foster has a personal issue with him, which James Harden, obviously James Harden's echoing it because he's heard it directly from his teammate Chris Paul. And I assume Chris Webber, if he's invoking that, heard it directly from Chris Paul as well. What the root of that is, I don't know. I think it's dangerous to throw that out there, though, Rich. I think for the player to throw out there that this is not about a particular official or about that official's style, but instead is somehow personal, that kind of poisons the well. And further, James Harden went one step beyond that, not just poisoning the well, basically saying he can't referee our games. You can't have that. Players cannot be dictating, teams cannot be dictating which officials rotate in and out of their games. And Scott Foster has been, for years, one of the highest rated referees in the NBA. You will see him always deep in the playoffs and in the finals. And, that if the Rockets are going to be around deep into the postseason, they're going to see him multiple times. And the last thing you want to do, I would think, one, is to inflame that situation, with the referee himself and with the league office, but two, to then create this haze around every time Scott Foster referees your game, because now everyone's going to be talking about it and writing about it, commenting on it, and they're going to start to see every call he makes or doesn't make through that prism. That is corrosive. That is exactly why the league has fines and a fine structure for criticizing refs, because they don't want to get into a situation like this where people start viewing everything through this warped lens.
Scott Foster was voted in an LA Times poll of unnamed players the worst referee in the league in 2016, so he has that as well. And he does have 25 years in the league too, though, Howard. I mean, a couple years ago when we saw a tech extravaganza in the NBA, the conversation was all the vets had been cycled out and retired, and the new guys coming in didn't have any relationships with the players and is leading to a lot of miscommunication and a lot of technical fouls. But Foster's been around a quarter century. I'm wondering, do we have the problem again of officiating in players, or this is just a one-off, do you think?
Well, I think it's something that ebbs and flows, Rich. I mean, it's something that never really goes away if you think about it. I mean, last year was this spike, and I think, frankly, the spike in player-referee tensions last year, I think, was a little overdone by all of us in the media. I don't think it was ever as bad as it looked. There were a few high-profile cases involving high-profile teams or some of the bigger stars in the game, so it got more attention than usual. But I don't think it was necessarily any better or worse of a year. These things do ebb and flow. It sometimes does depend on the composition of the officiating staff at any given time. It sometimes depends on just the generation of players. There was a time when players, made their complaint, and then went on their way. And now we've got guys, at least last season, they were really not letting it go. And, it's frankly a fruitless pursuit. I've never seen a referee change a call based on a player complaining that he got it wrong, because they can't. They can't take back the whistle. So I think that this case is specific to one referee and one player or team. So this is not necessarily a Scott Foster issue. I haven't heard the rest of the league say the same, that it's all personal. This is about Chris Paul and Scott Foster, apparently. To the LA Times thing, I just want to say real quick, it was a limited number of players. It's obviously not a full poll of all 450 players.
Not scientific.
And when players are asked about who's the worst ref, they're going to go with the guy that they don't like. So skill-wise, Scott Foster rates out, and these guys get reviewed to death by the league office. Scott Foster still rates out as one of their top refs year in, year out. So we know he's one of their best refs no matter what the player poll might have concluded. But those guys are going to vote or going to offer a name based more on whether they like a guy or not, or whether, as Chris Paul and James Harden allude to, whether or not he's willing to engage when you disagree with him.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.